You know, the internet, GPS, voice assistants, all the technology that pretty much runs our daily lives. Have you ever stopped to think about where it all really came from? Well, the answer isn't some startup in a Silicon Valley garage. Nope, it's a secretive military agency. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and uncover the hidden history of the one organization that basically built our digital world. So, let's just dive right in. Think about it. The internet, the GPS that gets you home without a second thought, and the very foundations of artificial intelligence. What on earth could tie all of these massive, world-changing innovations together? It's not a famous inventor you've heard of, and it's definitely not a tech giant. That's right. Every single one of them traces its roots back to one single place, a small but incredibly powerful agency deep inside the U.S. Department of Defense. This is the story of how the Pentagon, maybe by accident, maybe on purpose, ended up building the future that we're all living in right now. But you know, our story doesn't start in a computer lab with a bunch of nerds. No, it starts in the cold, black vacuum of space. It begins with one single event that sent an absolute shockwave of fear across the United States and kicked off a technological race for survival. So, October 4th, 1957. That's the day the world really changed. The Soviet Union launches Sputnik 1. And for the very first time, there's a man-made object orbiting the Earth. And it wasn't American. The US suddenly realized it had been completely caught by surprise. The response was, as you can imagine, incredibly swift and decisive. Just 4 months later, President Eisenhower creates the Advanced Research Projects Agency, or ARPA for short. So what was ARPA's job? It's actually pretty simple. Make sure another Sputnik never, ever happens. Ensure America is never technologically surprised again. But the way they went about it was, well, it was radical. They weren't going to focus on making slightly better weapons. No, their mission was to fund high-risk, high-gain research. We're talking about the really far-out, wild science that might not pay off for decades, or maybe ever. And what was the result of that crazy mission? Well, decades down the line, The Economist would call it, and I quote, the agency that shaped the modern world. That is a bold claim, for sure. But as you're about to see, it's not an exaggeration at all. So with this really unique mission and a ton of funding, ARPA basically started a golden age of computer science. It was like they were planting all these little seeds that would eventually grow into the digital revolution. Just think about the kinds of projects ARPA was bankrolling. ARPANET, which was, the network that literally became the internet. Transit, the very first satellite navigation system, the direct ancestor of the GPS in your phone. Time-sharing, this wild idea that let lots of people use one giant computer at the same time, which is what made personal computing even possible. Even stuff like early computer graphics and word processing got their start right here. You know, the AI pioneer Marvin Minsky, he just captured this creative explosion perfectly. He said that these early researchers, these hackers as he called them, they just did everything first. They weren't just following a blueprint. They were literally inventing the language of computing as they went. It's amazing. And this spirit of just pure exploration led to some really audacious, kind of funny moments. Can you imagine being so confident in your new AI program that you actually list it as a co-author on a scientific paper? Well, that's exactly what Alan Noel and Herbert Simon did. And the journal editor, completely missing the point, of course, rejected it. It just goes to show you how ridiculously far ahead of their time these ARPA-funded researchers were. Now, all of this research needed an absolutely immense amount of computing power, and this need pushed technology forward, leading to incredible machines like the Cray YMP-90 supercomputer. And that brings us to this number, 2.67 billion. That is how many operations per second that beast could perform back in 1993. I mean, this machine was so powerful, it was basically on the verge of destroying itself at all times. It worked so fast, it could literally melt its own circuits. It needed this whole complex special coolant system just to keep it from turning into a puddle. And, in a fun little twist, the engineers nicknamed it Barney because of its very, very purple color. But this golden age, this period of what seemed like limitless curiosity-driven research, well, it couldn't last forever. A political shift was happening in Washington, and it was about to cause a deep, sudden freeze across the entire field of artificial intelligence. Yeah, this slide here really nails the dramatic shift. On one side, you've got the golden age, all the funding you could want, crazy optimism, and progress just exploding. And on the other side, the AI winter. Funding gone, massive budget cuts, and this new, chilling reality for all the researchers. So what happened? So the trigger was a piece of legislation. It was called the Mansfield Amendment. It passed in 1973, and it stated very clearly that from now on, defense funding could only be used for projects that had a direct, immediate military use. And just like that, the whole high-risk, high-gain mission that made ARPA so special, which by then had been renamed DARPA, was just gone. The era of funding blue sky research was over.
And the agency's reaction was harsh. The message coming out of DARPA was incredibly blunt. There was this warning that some top researchers were going to be taught a lesson. The top labs at places like MIT, Stanford, and Carnegie Mellon saw their multi-million-dollar contracts just slashed to almost nothing practically overnight. The message couldn't have been clearer. The rules of the game had changed, and the freewheeling era of invention was being shut down.
But that's not where the story ends, not even close. While the AI winter had this massive impact, that original spirit of DARPA, that insane drive to just invent the future, it never really died. It just evolved. So let's take a look at what that legacy looks like today. I mean, today's DARPA projects sound like they're straight out of science fiction. You've got AI pilots dogfighting in F-16s, giant autonomous underwater drones they're calling manta ray, brain-computer interfaces for soldiers, an experimental plane with no moving parts on its wings. Think about that. They're even working on a nuclear-powered rocket for deep space travel. The high-risk, high-gain idea is clearly still alive and kicking. And that really brings us to our final thought here. From the internet that connects all of us to the GPS that guides us, DARPA's fingerprints are literally all over our modern world. So as we look to the horizon for the next great technological leap, the real question is, should we even be surprised if we trace it back, once again, to this small, secretive Department of Mad Scientists whose whole job is to invent the future?